I'm Nupur Chawla, teaching English Literature at Maitri College, Delhi University, and today's lecture is part of the ongoing series on the English essay. And the lecture is titled Samuel Johnson, the Rambler. Now, you see, in the previous discussions, in the previous lectures, we talked about the essay form, which is a genre in itself in English literature, how it came into being in the 18th century, what are its features, that how the essay was one of the means for the authors to comment upon the society, to make sure that the pitfalls or the shortcomings at a given point of time were highlighted. And then there was also a purpose of entertainment, whereby sometimes these essays resorted to wit, not only for the sake of wit in order to quote unquote correct, but at the same time also for the sake of kind of discussing something which did not really have a lot of relevance, but then would contribute to entertainment. Social correction along with entertainment, along with observation about society, talking about day-to-day life, talking about people, talking about scandals. All these were, the concerns that one witnessed in the English essay as it came into being in the 18th century. Now, you see, we of course dedicated our discussions on these features, so I will not go into those at any length, but we have been through the series taking up discussions of different essayists. So there were lectures on Addison, there were lectures on Steele, there were lectures on Elizabeth Heywood, all these that are seminal names when it comes to the English essay. And each of them contributed to their form in their own way. And in today's lecture, we are going to talk about another very seminal author, that is Samuel Johnson, and his contribution to this genre, right? And I'm sure those of you who have studied the history of English literature, you would have come across these titles, these names, and Samuel Johnson is very often associated with the Rambler, which was another periodical by him, a periodical essay as we call it. So this is what we are going to talk about and discuss today. So Samuel Johnson, I know that he needs no introduction for somebody who has some background in literature, but Johnson was born in 1709 and was around till 1784. He was a poet, essayist, biographer, a canonizer of literary history. So we now, what do we mean by canonizer of literary history? We see that along with very famous poems, essays by Johnson, he has also commented on some very seminal writers that have been in literary history. For example, there are brilliant essays that he wrote on Shakespeare, right? And likewise, this is another very famous work by him that's called Life of Poets. So we see that how Johnson also contributed immensely along these lines, where he shared insights about writers and poets of different times. So that's how we know Johnson, and we also are aware, if you read his poems, they're full of wit. So that is one of the very important features of his writing style as well. But if you look at his works, the list of his works, you see, he brought out periodical papers that were, for example, I mean, one of them was the Rambler, that was published between 1750 to 52, and the other one was the Adventurer, that was published between 52 to 54, and the Idler, that was a series in the Universal Chronicle, published from 1758 to 1760, right? So these three were the periodical papers that he is associated with, and along with that, poems including London, that was published in 1738, The Vanity of Human Wishes in 1749. These two are one of the very famous poems by Johnson, and those of us who are familiar with the poet would have come across these poems, and if not, you must read them because they are great masterpieces of in verse. But what we've seen is, through the dates of his periodical papers and his poems, we see that how this writer is situated in the heart of the 18th century, right? Along with periodical papers and poems, he's also associated with writing a satirical novel, even though we do not talk about we do not talk about Johnson as much as a novelist, but well, he wrote an important satirical novel called Rasselas in 1759. He also brought out a critical edition of Shakespeare in 1765 and a travel narrative that was called A Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland in 1775. So you see, these were his contributions to fiction. And then he also wrote a series of biographical essays. I just now mentioned Lives of the English Poets from 1779 to 81. And most importantly, which is oft quoted, he is also given the credit for authoring the Dictionary of the English Language in 1755. So you see, looking at his contributions, we know that we are not dealing with an ordinary, a literary personality, but instead one who had a significant influence on 18th century literature, and that too across genres. If you see on your screens, that's the one of the images of Samuel Johnson from the 18th century. Now you see, if we just get a sense that what exactly was Johnson known for. So one of the foremost things we say is that he was known, I mean, along with wit, of course, because that was his style. He was known for his insights into human nature and society. Now remember, in the beginning of the lecture also I mentioned that how essays, one of the purposes or one of the features of the English essay was to share insights on society and at the same time social reform. So you see, this was not only restricted to the essay form, but that was what the sentiment of 18th century England largely was. That's what anybody that was writing at the time was kind of influenced by this drift of writing. So similarly, Johnson was also known for his insights into human nature and society. So he would observe very carefully, observe closely, and discuss about human nature, talk about how human beings respond in different situations, what are the consequences of certain traits or value systems that one has. So you see, all these insights were then available in his works. Now, those of us who've heard of Johnson would have also heard of another name which it's very difficult to miss if you talk about Johnson, that is James Boswell. Now you see, all these insights of into human nature and society, while yes, they did find way into his works, but Johnson would also, even while talking in general, he would come up with these witticisms, with these aphorisms. There were very short, pithy statements that were loaded with insight and wisdom, but well, to him, he would just speak them out casually. So now they were all recorded by his biographer James Boswell, right? So he transcribed the witticisms, aphorisms, maxims and epigrams that readily dropped from this master prose stylist. So when we say that they readily dropped, it means that very self-consciously Johnson would say something about human nature, which was very, very true, which was, very, very wise. But he would say it very unself-consciously, and Boswell would immediately take it down, right? So that's the other thing that we know about this author. In fact, for those of you who are interested in Johnson, you must look up his aphorisms and witticisms and epigrams. They are incredibly, of course, full of wit, wonderful command over language and use of language, and most importantly, great insights into human nature. In fact, I would say that we talk about Shakespeare as somebody who had incredible insight into human mind, into human behavior, into social patterns, etc. Johnson, was no less, right? He also was an individual who displayed immense observation and knowledge and awareness of patterns of what humans do and why they do, and these little truths that you live by in your day-to-day life. So that's the other thing that Johnson was very, very famously known for, and Boswell, his biographer, took down all these details in day-to-day life, because as he would accompany him wherever he would go. So coming back to the Rambler, so you see that's just to give you a sense of Johnson, the writer, and what all did he write and what was the tenor of his writing. So now you see, coming back to the periodical that he published, the Rambler was published as a 2-penny sheet from 20th March 1750 to 14th March 1752. So you see 2 years. That's the duration that this periodical, the Rambler, was brought out. And in our initial discussions, we also talked about the term Rambler, where does it come from. Now you see, while discussing the other essayists and other periodicals such as the Spectator, the Tatler, etc., we said that how all these essays, there was this a commonality that was witnessed, that there was a persona that was created by the author, right? And that persona would be seen across all the issues of these periodicals. So now what was the use of this persona? He would be the lens through which the society would be viewed, analyzed, and then the expressions, the observations would then be expressed in the form of an essay. So likewise, so you see the Spectator, if you look at the word, it means somebody who's watching, somebody who's looking. So that was the persona in the periodical, the Spectator. Now if you come to the Rambler, now the word Rambler also has a meaning. So here the persona would, it is derived from the word ramble. Ramble means to talk aimlessly, where sometimes things do not connect, but the thrust remains that these are the thoughts of somebody who is expressing himself and expressing openly, right? And it's through these, maybe what he intended to convey was that it's through these quote-unquote ramblings of the Rambler, of the persona in this periodical, that the insights were shared by the author with his audience. So so that's just a little view into what the term itself means and where it came from. Now you see, the next thing that we say about the Rambler is that most of the most of the periodicals in the 18th century, they took shape in the coffee house culture of the 18th century. Now what do we mean by the coffee house culture? In the 18th century England, this was a culture, this was part of the tradition that thinkers, intellectuals, writers, poets, artists, they would periodically meet in coffee houses and hold discussions, right? And so therefore coffee houses were very, very fertile spaces for art at that point of time, and a lot of literary works, a lot of ventures, they took shape from these spaces itself. So likewise, even these periodicals where where we saw the essays being written, they also had their beginnings in the coffee house culture. But this is where the Rambler kind of departs a bit from the set tradition. So, as opposed to the coffee house culture that shaped the Tatler and the Spectator, these two very famous periodicals of 18th century, Johnson turned to the meditative space of his own closet or study. So that's where the Rambler had its beginnings, not in a coffee house, not in the middle of discussions amongst artists and intellectuals and thinkers, but instead in the isolation, or as this critic says, the meditative space of his own closet or study. That's where the Rambler came into being, right? So adopting the persona of the Rambler, Johnson invoked his precursor, who begins the Spectator's number 3. Number 3 means the third volume or the issue of the Spectator, when he says, "One of my tale rambles, or rather speculations," unquote. So now you see, this is a quote that we notice in number 3, Spectator, where the persona in the Spectator says that one of my tale rambles. So a lot of critics kind of believe that the word Rambler then invokes his Johnson's precursor, or the Rambler's precursor, that is the Spectator, which was another periodical where the central persona mentions that one of my late rambles, or rather speculation. So this is of course a phrase or a half sentence, but this seems to have laid, one can say, or was the inspiration for the word that was picked up by Johnson, right? Now the next thing that we say is that we've of course mentioned that how wit is an important part of Johnson's style, but there are two other things which we also need to keep in mind when we think about Johnson's writing style. Now you see, he says antithesis and a Latin diction were the other two features of his writing, right? And what is antithesis? It can be defined as, and I quote, "a figure of speech involving a seeming contradiction of ideas, words, clauses, or sentences within a balanced grammatical structure. Parallelism of expression serves to emphasize oppositions of ideas," unquote. So you see, antithesis then was another very important feature of Johnson's writing style, where two seemingly contradictory words or ideas or clauses would be brought together by Johnson within a very balanced grammatical structure, right? And and there would be a kind of a parallelism between the expressions, right? And this would also serve to emphasize the opposition between the two ideas, right? So let's say, for example, if one thinks of an instance of antithesis, one may say that either let me die or let my creative abilities die a slow death, right? So the person dying and his creative abilities dying, right? The two are opposite. One talks about the end of life and the other talks about the end of creativity, but well, they are talked about in the same sentence. Of course, that's very, talking of it offhand. There are various other examples as well, but bringing together two opposite phrases, words, ideas in one sentence is what we call as antithesis, and that is what Johnson explored in his writing, along with wit. That was also a very important part of his writing. Now, by wit, we do not just mean something which makes you laugh, but yes, it does at times evoke laughter, but wit also involves a very smart and a very clever use of words, where the expression is very sharp, and it's very clever, as we just now said. So when we say that his or her expression is witty, so what we mean is that the use of language is very efficient, and also the idea conveyed is incredibly to the point, and very well expressed. So all of this also contributes to wit that we talk of, right? So these are some of the things that we keep in mind vis-a-vis the writing style of Samuel Johnson. But you see, one thing that comes to our mind also is that that the essay form was a lot more informal, right? As we have also discussed in our initial lectures, and in the beginning as well we talked about it. And then if we keep that thought in mind and then we compare it to Johnson's writing style, there is some disjunct over there. So his language, as we just now said, had Latin diction. It was full of wit. He spoke in antithesis, or he wrote in antithesis. So you see, such stateliness of language was peculiarly unsuited to the light subjects which had hitherto been the favorite themes of the essayists, right? So that's the point that we observe, that the themes of the essays were not very elevated. They were not very serious so far, right? But the language that Johnson used, well, that would then appear, particularly unsuited to the light subjects, quote unquote light subjects of the essay, right? So with this, then we come to the next point, that then were themes in the Rambler similar to the ones that went before? Were the themes in the Rambler similar to the periodical essays that came before it? Not really. So that's the other point of distinction that we notice in Johnson's periodical, The Rambler. Now the themes of the Rambler then are almost as widely different from those of the Spectator as is its style, right? So the spirit in which he did his work is indicated in the prayer, in which he asks the guidance of the Holy Spirit in the composition of the Rambler, and he says that I may promote thy glory and the salvation of myself and others, unquote. Now you see, this is this is a kind of a composition that we notice in one of the issues of the Rambler, where he asks the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Now you see, this was one of the traditions. In 18th century, we know that it was the age of enlightenment, and the authors followed the literary traditions of the classical age, and this invocation to a higher spirit, or the invocation to the supernatural, was one of the conventions, one of the literary conventions from the classical times. So following along the similar lines, Johnson also over here says that addresses the Holy Spirit and says that I may promote thy glory, give me that strength, that in the course of writing, through my writing, I may promote thy glory and the salvation of myself and others. Salvation is a very serious idea, right? So that's the point that we are making, that the themes, the intention of the Rambler was somewhat a lot more serious than than the periodicals that had gone before, right? So in this first half of the lecture, we noticed or we discussed Samuel Johnson as a writer. We looked at his writing style. We understood a bit about his periodical, the Rambler, and we also understood that how do we situate it not only in the 18th century context, but also in comparison to other periodicals or the essay periodicals that came before it. Thank you.